Stop right there before you toss that handful of dirty, dark, and seemingly worthless old pennies into a change jar or a vending machine. You need to look closer. Every single day, thousands of Americans unknowingly give away hidden fortunes simply because they don't know what to look for. They see green corrosion, black spots, and heavy wear, and they immediately assume the coin is just damaged garbage. But experienced collectors know the absolute truth. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking, dirt-covered copper coin is actually a surviving piece of American history that advanced numismatists are desperately searching for. Today, we are going completely deep into three specific Lincoln wheat pennies that you might have sitting in your pocket, an old cigar box, or an inherited collection right now. I'm going to reveal the exact details, the microscopic mint marks, the historical context, and the hidden clues that separate a simple 1-cent piece of pocket change from a highly desirable collector's item. But I need you to make me one promise before we begin. If you find one of these coins after learning these secrets, do not spend it, and whatever you do, do not clean it until you have watched this entire investigation. The third coin we are going to examine today is one of the most misunderstood pieces of post-war American currency, and the tiny letter stamped beneath its date has caused endless fascination among experts for decades. Stay with me, pay attention to every single detail, because what you are about to learn will permanently change the way you look at every single coin that passes through your hands from this day forward. 1940. Lincoln Wheat Penny. Our journey begins in the year 1940, a time when the world was standing on the absolute brink of massive global change. The Great Depression was finally fading into the rearview mirror, but across the ocean, tensions in Europe were escalating rapidly into what would become World War II. Here in the United States, American industry was beginning to wake up. Factories were ramping up production, employment was shifting, and the daily lives of millions of Americans relied heavily on physical cash. People used pennies every single day to buy newspapers, purchase basic groceries, ride the bus, or grab a cup of coffee. To meet this massive, growing demand for everyday currency, the United States Mint facility in Philadelphia worked tirelessly, striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln wheat pennies to keep the national economy moving without interruption. No one standing at those minting presses in 1940 could have ever imagined that more than 80 years later, modern collectors would be sitting under bright magnification lamps, carefully studying these exact same coins, hoping to find a perfectly preserved survivor from that historic year. When you hold a 1940 Lincoln wheat penny in your hand, you are holding a direct physical link to that pre-war era. To the untrained eye, it might just look like a dark, sticky, or worn-out piece of old copper. But you have to look past the surface. Take a very close look at the front of the coin, which collectors call the obverse. You will instantly recognize the incredibly famous, enduring portrait of President Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. This iconic design was created by the legendary sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it first debuted all the way back in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Across the very top rim of the coin, you will see the inspiring national motto, "In God We Trust," curving perfectly along the edge. Just to the left of Lincoln's shoulder is the word liberty, standing as a proud symbol of American values. Now look to the right side of Lincoln's chest, right where the date 1940 is stamped. Notice something incredibly important. Look directly underneath the numbers of 1940. There is an empty space. There is no letter, no mint mark whatsoever. To a beginner, this might look like a mistake or an error, but experienced numismatists know exactly what this means. The absence of a mint mark is actually the signature of the Philadelphia Mint. During this era, the Philadelphia facility was the main branch of the United States Mint, and they did not place a P mint mark on Lincoln cents. That tiny blank space below the date is the very first thing a professional collector checks to verify exactly where this coin was born. Now turn the coin over and examine the reverse. This is the classic design that gave this entire series its universally recognized nickname, the wheat penny. Two beautifully engraved, sweeping wheat stalks frame the left and right sides of the coin, symbolizing the vast agricultural wealth and endurance of the American nation. Arching across the top edge is the traditional Latin phrase, e pluribus unum, which translates to out of many, One, right in the center, taking up the most visual space, are the bold, undeniable words 1 cent, with United States of America positioned immediately beneath it. It is a masterpiece of simple, elegant numismatic design. But to truly understand this coin, you have to understand exactly what it is made of. The 1940 Philadelphia Lincoln cent was struck to incredibly precise government specifications. It is composed of a solid bronze alloy, specifically 95% copper, combined with 5% tin and zinc. This exact metallic recipe is what gives the coin its deep, rich, warm appearance when it first rolls off the press. It weighs approximately 3.11 grams, has a diameter of 19.05 millimeters, and a thickness of roughly 1.52 millimeters. Its edge is completely plain and smooth, without any reading or grooves. These specifications are not just random numbers. They are the absolute baseline that experts use to authenticate a coin and ensure it has not been altered, shaved, or counterfeited over the last 8 decades. This brings us to the most crucial, heartbreaking mistake that ordinary people make every single day when they find a 1940 wheat penny. Because this coin is made of 95% copper, it reacts very strongly to the environment. Over 80 years of passing through sweaty hands, sitting in humid basements, resting inside leather wallets, or being tossed into damp jars, the copper oxidizes. It develops dark brown, almost black patches. Sometimes it develops a powdery green substance known as verdigris. When an average person sees a 1940 penny covered in dark grime and green spots, their first instinct is to take it to the kitchen sink, grab a brush, some baking soda, or harsh chemical polish, and scrub the coin until it looks shiny and brand new. If you remember nothing else from this investigation, remember this: never, ever clean your coin. Experienced collectors do not want a shiny, artificially polished, scratched-up coin. When you scrub an old copper penny, you are permanently destroying the original, microscopic surface layer that took 80 years to form. You leave behind thousands of tiny, unnatural hairline scratches that completely ruin the coin's numismatic appeal. A dark, dirty, honestly worn 1940 penny is always worth more to a serious collector than one that has been aggressively cleaned. Those dark spots and toning marks are the coin's history. They prove its authenticity. While millions of 1940 no-mint mark pennies were produced, finding one today that has escaped heavy damage, harsh cleaning, and extreme wear is becoming harder every year. When experts evaluate this coin, they look closely at Lincoln's hair details, his cheekbone, and the fine parallel lines in the wheat ears on the back. A coin that has circulated heavily will have these high points worn completely flat, blending into the rest of the surface. But if you happen to find one that was tucked away in a drawer in 1940 and never spent, retaining its original reddish-orange mint luster and sharp, crisp details, you are holding something truly special. Professional grading services use a strict scale from 1 to 70 to evaluate these coins, and while a heavily worn brown 1940 penny might only hold modest collector value, a flawless, uncirculated red gem can ignite intense bidding wars at major auctions. The secret is in the preservation, the originality, and the patience to look closer than anyone else. But do not get too comfortable, because our next coin takes us directly into the heart of the most devastating conflict in human history, featuring a unique metal composition that changed American coinage forever. 1944 S. Lincoln Wheat Penny. We now move forward in time to the year 1944. The United States is fully engulfed in the raging fires of World War II. The entire nation is mobilized. Millions of American troops are fighting overseas, and back home, every single ounce of raw material is being strictly rationed to support the massive military effort. Just 1 year prior, in 1943, the United States Mint had been forced to stop using copper for pennies entirely because the military desperately needed that copper for ammunition casings, telephone wire, and vital equipment. That is why the famous 1943 pennies were made of steel coated with zinc. But the steel pennies were a complete logistical nightmare. They rusted rapidly in people's pockets. They confused vending machines, and they were constantly mistaken for silver dimes by the public. The Mint knew they had to go back to a copper-based penny, but copper was still strictly rationed. To solve this massive national problem, the government executed one of the most brilliant and fascinating recycling programs in the history of global economics. They began gathering spent brass artillery shells and bullet casings from military training bases and actual battlefields, shipping them back to the United States, melting them down and mixing them with virgin copper to create the planchets for the 1944 Lincoln cents. When you hold a 1944 Lincoln wheat penny, you are quite literally holding recycled World War II ammunition. It is a piece of military and numismatic history fused together into a single 1-cent coin. But we are not just looking at any 1944 penny today. We are looking specifically at the 1944 S. Take your magnifying glass and look closely at the obverse of the coin, directly beneath the date 1944. If you see a small, distinct letter S resting under those numbers, your heart should start beating a little faster. That tiny letter means this specific coin was struck at the legendary San Francisco Mint. While the Philadelphia Mint was churning out over 1 billion of these coins, the San Francisco branch produced a much smaller fraction. Out on the West Coast, the San Francisco facility was a critical artery for commerce, but their production numbers were almost always lower than the main branch, making coins with the S mint mark inherently more fascinating to date and mint collectors trying to complete their sets. Because these coins were struck using salvaged shell casing bronze, their exact composition is slightly different from the pre-war years. They consist of 95% copper and 5% zinc, completely omitting the tin that was normally used in the traditional bronze alloy. This slight change in the metallurgical recipe often gave the newly struck 1944 pennies a slightly different visual tone, a slightly more brassy or vibrant yellow-red hue when they were freshly minted. The weight remains the standard 3.11 grams, and the diameter holds true at 19.05 millimeters. When experienced numismatists evaluate an 1944 wheat penny, they know that the San Francisco Mint had a notorious reputation for producing coins with wildly varying strike qualities during the war years. The pressure to produce currency rapidly often led to overworked dies. A die is the heavy steel stamp that features the inverted image of the coin, and it strikes the blank metal planchet with immense force. When a die is used for too long without being replaced, it begins to wear down, lose its sharp edges, and sometimes even crack. Therefore, a 1944 penny might show very weak, mushy details on Lincoln's coat lapel, or the wheat stalks on the reverse might look faded even if the coin never actually circulated. This is why collectors become absolutely obsessed with finding a 1944 that was struck with a fresh, sharp die. They will spend hours under bright halogen lights, rotating the coin back and forth, looking for what is called the cartwheel effect. This is a phenomenon where the original microscopic metal flow lines created during the striking process catch the light, causing a bright band of luster to spin around the face of the coin like the spokes of a wheel. If a 1944 penny still has its original, unbroken cartwheel luster, it means the coin has survived since World War II without ever being rubbed, carried in a pocket, or improperly stored. Once again, we must return to the golden rule of coin collecting, a rule that applies to the 1944 more than almost anything else. The shell casing bronze composition is highly reactive. Over the decades, these coins often tone deeply, turning rich chocolate brown, mahogany, or sometimes developing streaks of blue and purple depending on the sulfur in the paper envelopes or albums they were stored in. When a novice finds a 1944 that looks dark or discolored, they reach for the polishing cloth. Do not do it. By wiping that coin, you are instantly erasing the historical patina of World War II. You are destroying the exact characteristics that a professional grading service looks for when determining if a coin is authentic and original. In the highly competitive world of registry set collecting, where advanced collectors compete to register the finest known examples of every date and mint mark, a perfectly preserved 1944 in what is known as Mint State 67 Red is a prize of immense prestige. Most 1944 pennies you find in old jars will be heavily worn and brown, holding deep historical value but modest monetary value. However, the thrilling reality is that pristine, high-grade examples still occasionally surface from forgotten safety deposit boxes or old estate hoards. Identifying the S mint mark, verifying the strike quality, and protecting the uncleaned original surfaces is the ultimate difference between owning a common wartime relic and holding a magnificent, highly sought-after numismatic treasure. But keep your eyes wide open because the timeline is moving forward, the war is ending, and our third and final coin introduces a completely new era of collecting strategy that catches almost everyone off guard. 1946 S. Lincoln Wyatt Penny. The dust of World War II has finally settled. The year is 1946, and the United States is experiencing a massive, unprecedented cultural and economic shift. Millions of American soldiers have returned home from Europe and the Pacific. They are getting married, buying houses, starting families, and entering the workforce, sparking what would eventually be known as the post-war economic boom. American commerce is expanding at a breakneck pace, and physical money is changing hands faster than ever before in the nation's history. To support this explosive economic growth, the United States Mint returns to its traditional pre-war bronze composition, abandoning the recycled shell casings and bringing back the classic 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc formula. Amidst this incredible period of national rebirth, the San Francisco Mint strikes the 1946 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin that remains one of the most heavily scrutinized and debated issues among serious collectors today. When you find a 1946 penny, you must immediately flip it to the obverse and look directly under the date. Finding that crisp, distinct S mint mark transports you straight to the bustling San Francisco Mint during the dawn of the baby boomer era. While the total mintage numbers for the 1946 S were quite large, numbering in the high tens of millions, you must never let raw production numbers deceive you. In the world of advanced numismatics, it is never just about how many coins were made. It is entirely about how many coins survived in a condition that collectors actually want to own. And the harsh reality is that the vast, overwhelming majority of 1946 S pennies were instantly absorbed into the roaring post-war economy. They were used to buy candy, fund parking meters, pay for movie tickets, and dropped into millions of piggy banks. They were circulated relentlessly. This intense, prolonged circulation means that finding a 1946 S with truly flawless, untouched surfaces is a massive challenge. When an experienced collector picks up a 1946 S, they do not just look at it, they interrogate it. They understand that San Francisco Mint coins from the late 1940s are notorious for striking inconsistencies. The collectors pull out their high-powered jeweler's loops and immediately focus on the highest points of the coin's relief. They look at Lincoln's cheek, his jawline, and the very top of his hair. If the coin has seen any time in a pocket, these areas are the very first to lose their original metal and become flat and dull. They turn the coin over to the reverse and scrutinize the tips of the wheat ears and the O in the word one. Even the slightest hint of friction or wear instantly downgrades the coin from a pristine mint state piece to an about uncirculated example, causing its desirability among elite collectors to plummet. But the obsession with the 1946 SS goes far beyond simple wear and tear. It delves deep into the fascinating, highly subjective world of copper color grading. When third-party professional grading companies evaluate a 1946 S penny, they don't just assign it a numerical grade, they assign it a color designation. Brown, BN, red-brown, RB, or red, RD. This color designation is critical. A 1946 VATS designated as brown has naturally oxidized over the last nearly 80 years, turning a dark chocolate color. These coins are beautiful, highly historic, and beloved by everyday hobbyists, but they are generally common. A red-brown coin retains between 5% and 95% of its original fiery copper luster, showing a beautiful mix of aged patina and mint brilliance. But the holy grail, the coin that causes seasoned auction veterans to sit up and aggressively bid, is the fully red RD 1946 S. A fully read example looks exactly as it did the very second it fell from the coining press in San Francisco in 1946. It boasts a blinding, vibrant, untouched copper-orange brilliance because copper is incredibly reactive to air, moisture, and human touch. For a 1946S to survive completely red for nearly 8 decades is nothing short of a statistical miracle. It means the coin was likely rolled in a bank wrapper in 1946, placed in a climate-controlled environment, and completely hidden from the elements, untouched by human hands until it was finally discovered and sent to a grading service. This absolute rarity of flawless preservation is exactly why you must treat every single 1946S you find with extreme caution. If you are digging through an old mason jar in your attic and you pull out a 1946S that happens to have dark stains or dirt, your brain will scream at you to clean it to try and make it look red again. I will say it one final time, as it is the absolute gospel of coin collecting. Washing, rubbing, or chemically dipping, that coin will completely destroy its surface integrity. A chemically cleaned coin will never receive a genuine red designation from a professional grading service. It will receive a details cleaned grade, effectively stripping it of its premium market value and ruining a piece of post-war history. Furthermore, collectors scrutinize the 1946S for die varieties and anomalies. They look closely at the mint mark itself to see if it was punched into the die cleanly or if there is evidence of repunching, where the mint worker struck the letter S into the steel die multiple times, leaving a doubled image. They look for die cracks, which appear as raised, jagged lines across the surface of the coin, indicating the extreme pressure the San Francisco mint equipment was under. Every single microscopic scratch, toning spot, and strike characteristic tells a story that cannot be replicated. When you hold a 1940, a 1944S, or a 1946S Lincoln Wheat Penny, you are not just holding 1 cent. You are holding the buildup to World War II, the physical remnants of recycled ammunition from the height of the global conflict, and the booming optimism of the post-war American dream. These coins are physical time machines. The people who casually spend them or scrub them with household cleaners are completely blind to the silent fortunes and rich histories resting right in the palms of their hands. The collectors who truly succeed, the ones who uncover the most breathtaking numismatic treasures, are the ones who practice extreme patience. They are the ones who understand the strict metallurgical specifications, who respect the subtle signs of natural aging, and who know that the most valuable detail on a coin is often the one that everyone else completely ignored. So the next time you empty your pockets, don't just look at the date. Look at the mint mark, study the surface, respect the history, and never ever underestimate the power of an old dirty penny.